I want to pivot to talk about this really harrowing and very controversial story that you have for us, Lily, about marijuana edibles.
Absolutely. The new question for parents to teens is, do you teach your children weed gummy safety? This question may not have even crossed parents' minds, but after 12 William Floyd middle schoolers got sick after ingesting marijuana gummies, parents and even administrators are considering adding gummies to the list of drug prevention and safety talk for their children. On Monday, around 10 a.m., Suffolk County Police responded to the call for help after a dozen students became sick from consuming the edibles. Among the 12 kids, aged 13 to 14, 11 of them were sent to the hospital for precaution, with only one student being released to a parent. Suffolk County Police were investigating the matter, specifically who distributed the drugs and where they came from. But as of recently, they are leaving the fallout to the Morches School, who will deal with a disciplinary action, in which William Floyd School District said it cannot discuss the students' discipline publicly, but will be handling the situation with the appropriate consequences. One middle school parent who was picking up her daughter that same day was concerned about how young the students were to be consuming marijuana in an interview with NBC New York.
I've never dealt with it. I mean, like I said, in high school, I'm sure we all had our fair share of things going around, but middle school, that's a little different.
Now, parents and school administrators may be wondering what they actually need to know regarding their children's safety with drugs, even legalized and more common ones such as edible gummies. Newsday did a deep dive on this issue in which I'll be recapping the main points, but first it's important to notice the symptoms that marijuana can cause on a child, such as drowsiness, anxiety, and respiratory problems, which can really depend on the child's size and the amount of marijuana that they take. Dr. Matthew Harris, a pediatric emergency medicine physician at Cohen Children's Medical Center in New Hyde Park, stated that kids who come into the hospital after ingesting marijuana products, they typically leave the same day that they arrived, after observation and lots of hydration, and then it's very rare for edibles to be laced with other drugs. However, for children younger than 6 or those that are experiencing more serious symptoms such as vomiting or being unable to walk, hospitalization may be necessary, and treatment can include hydration with liquid IVs or even respiratory support. Incidents like Monday's have become more frequent since 2018, and some blame the effects of COVID when teenagers were stuck at home and getting into things that they should not have been getting into. Or when New York State legalized marijuana for recreational use back in 2021, opening the floor for an entire business to set up smoke and marijuana shops throughout the state, and ultimately giving accessibility to more people despite the sale only being legal for those 21 years of age and older and possessing 3 ounces of cannabis on them. There are multiple reasons as to why these incidents involving children and teens are rising, but it's enough to make parents consider talking to their teens more seriously about the risk of marijuana. The most important step that parents may take is to create a safe environment where their children can feel comfortable enough to have an open dialogue with their parents without feeling like they will be getting in an overwhelming amount of trouble in a scenario where they want to seek their parents as a resource for help. The point of this discussion is to not necessarily welcome the use of marijuana, but to let teens have an early understanding of the drug risks and what to do if they are in these situations, rather than telling them blankly that drugs are unsafe without any explanation of the risks and how to prevent these types of incidents. And many studies will show that the human brain does not develop until a person reaches their mid to late 20s, and that chronic use of marijuana in children and teens can damage memory and attention spans. So having this tough conversation early on may be the best way to counter the challenges of teenage peer pressure of marijuana and other drugs. Also in the article from Newsday, they mentioned that weed being legal does not necessarily mean that it is safe. Marijuana, like with any drugs or even just alcohol, there are risks to it. Let's remember that these students were 13, 14 years old. They were such a young age. And I wanted to bring up the discussion is, do we think that there should be a major disciplinary action among these students? I mean, the names will not be released. There was no charges. But for disciplinary action, how far should the school go?